The calculator was the fancy technology then.
That's right. Now we're going to start dating ourselves if we talk much more.
And I'm not talking about, these small calculators. It was a big thing.
That's right. You needed a backpack to carry your calculator, right?
Exactly.
Welcome to this episode of AEC Perspectives, a podcast put on by RS&H, and I am your host, Rachel Moore. I'm very excited to bring you today a topic that's going to touch pretty much everybody, including the experts we have on today's episode. We're going to discuss the state of transportation, and with our two experts, Tom Everett and Jim Hullett. And I will get to introducing them in a moment, but really I want to touch on why this is an important episode and topic and who it's important to. Transportation professionals, those of you who are in the industry out there, maybe you work for state departments of transportation, or you're an infrastructure owner or stakeholder, possibly you're an engineer, project manager, or consultant working in transportation infrastructure, and you are neck deep in planning, designing, and executing projects. Guess what? This episode is designed for you. So really excited to have you listening and watching today, because today we're going to educate y'all on current pressures and opportunities that are shaping the transportation industry. Some of you are probably feeling those very heavily right now. We're going to talk about them and also share how RS&H can help navigate those changes. So I'm not going to navigate this by myself. We have our two experts that I've alluded to that I'm about to introduce to you. So first up, we have Tom Everett. He has more than 40 years of experience in engineering and policy leadership, including 3 years as the executive director of the Federal Highway Administration, or as we all lovingly know it, FHWA. Tom joined RS&H in 2022, and he serves as the Senior Vice President and Infrastructure Market Strategy Lead. Lot of words there, and he's going to be expounding on why he earns every single one of them as his title. With deep expertise in highway and bridge design, construction and maintenance, and a comprehensive understanding of transportation issues, Tom plays a pivotal role in driving strategic initiatives and advancing infrastructure solutions. Tom, I feel pretty amazed that we get to share this space with you today after reading all that. So Tom, thanks for being on the podcast today.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Obviously, yes, it's wonderful. All right, and next up, I want to introduce Jim Hullett. With over 30 years of transportation engineering experience spanning both the public and private sectors, Jim is a seasoned leader in the industry. He joined RS&H in April 2004, initially serving as the Transportation Infrastructure Practice Director of Operations, also a mouthful. Today, as Executive Vice President and Transportation Market Leader, Jim spearheads the firm's transportation market strategy. Before his tenure at RS&H, he served for 15 years with the Georgia Department of Transportation. Jim, glad to have you on here too. You obviously are also responsible for a lot, so it's great to be able to share podcast time with you today.
I'm excited to be here. Look forward to it.
Excellent. All right, well, let's dig in. Now that we know what we're going to talk about, we know who we're hearing from today. So, Jim, I'm going to take this first question to you to set the stage for us a bit. How would you describe the current state of the transportation industry right now from where you sit and what you know?
Well, Rachel, first I'll say that's a loaded question, but I'll do my best. So, if you step back and look at the transportation market today, the headline's clear. It's going to say, we're in a period of historic investment, but, the execution's uneven. As we look forward now into the next chapter, or the next phase in the transportation industry, it's not going to be about, who wins more work, but it's going to be about who can deliver it better. Right now we're seeing record funding. It's translating into a lot of record activity. We're seeing total construction activity last year toppling over 200 billion. And, if you heard from our ARTBA friends, they would say that, quote, we're, in a record cycle. Or if you went to our AASHTO friends, they would agree, and they'd say that, states are actively deploying once-in-a-generation funding. But even with that, the strength isn't spread evenly across the system, and that's the challenge. Performance varies across the different assets. So, for instance, bridges and tunnels and ports and airports, they're all experiencing, strong growth, while on the highway side, transit and rail, they're much flatter. So the takeaway, here is that, it's not universally a booming market. It's project driven. It's a little lumpy. It's shaped by funding categories, readiness, and delivering capacity. And, and despite the surge in the spending, the backlog's still defining the story. 1 in 3 U.S. bridges, that's more than 220,000 structures across the country, is in need of repair or replacements. And, although the states are committing a lot of substantial resources, those needs still far exceed the current investment levels. And that's why both AASHTO and ARTBA consistently frame this as a catch-up market, not a fully modernized system. At the same time, there are other real constraints that remain, things like, workforce shortages and material costs that continue to escalate. And we see long environmental and permitting timelines that continue to slow the execution. The bottom line here, Rachel, is that, money's no longer the primary constraint. It's the capacity to execute that's the challenge. And, as we look ahead into the near term, the outlook's stable but moderating. We're expecting growth at about 3%, with total construction activity approaching about $210 billion this year. We see highway spending, though, in particular, kind of, remaining relatively flat at historical high levels. This creates a major shift from funding conversations to delivery risk, really. Projects are advancing rapidly from authorization through design and then to construction, but it's resulting in, those delivery pressures that I mentioned earlier. And, at the same time, the reauthorization risk, is emerging. The current federal program's nearing its expiration this fall, and, without Congress action on a new bill, the industry could face a post-IIJA dip, which would be of major concern. Tom and I were out and about at these AASHTO conferences and meeting with our DOT clients around the country, and I think Tom would agree with me that, without a doubt, long-term funding is the biggest single issue that they're facing. There's some trends, that we see shaping the future. For example, kind of a strong fix-it-first mindset focus on bridges and preservation and resilience will be key. The rise of large, complex, major mega projects that's funded through some of the competitive grants. And then there's a growing emphasis on innovation. We're facing this internally at RS&H, but it's faced with our clients in our industry, things like digital delivery, AI, and alternative delivery models, and also performance-based asset management. And then I'll kind of wrap my piece up here on this from where I see it from my seat. And finally, I'd just add that, while the federal dollars remain critical, I'll say that, our state DOTs, doing a great job in their areas in many states where, the states have raised their own revenues, they're matching federal funds, and, they're doing a really good job driving their project pipelines.
Excellent recap on that. There's obviously a lot going on, and I want to, first recognize, thank you so much for offering all those insights, because it's obvious why there was a need to bring up this topic and share about it. Tom, I want to take then that same question to you. Anything to add on to what Jim just shared about how you're viewing the current state of the transportation industry right now?
Yeah, thank you. Not a lot to add. I got to just start by saying I agree with everything Jim said. I sum it up in my way by saying the highway market's in a very strong place right now. There's real money, real projects, real demand, driven by infrastructure that's not getting any younger, congestion that's not getting any better, and unfortunately, people still die on our highways. So we have these needs that are still there. But it is a market that's under pressure. So as Jim mentioned, the costs are up. I'm not sure that you talked about the Highway Trust Fund, Jim, but that's not providing enough funds to meet all those needs. Mm-hmm. So that's another concern. Highway capacity's tight. Bridges are taxed by not just their age, but the increasing loads. We keep getting more and more legal vehicles allowed on bridges and highways, and that takes a toll. So agencies are really focused on what can be delivered, I'd say, predictably and defended publicly, especially with federal policy uncertainty looming after 2026. I read where the American Council for Engineering Companies, or ACEC, did a survey, and they reported that 91% of the respondents pointed to political uncertainty as their key area of concern regarding the transportation market. I thought it would have been a shortage of funding, Jim, like you were getting at, but we're in a different time right now, certainly, and political uncertainty is at the top of the mind. Coming from the federal background, I can say Regulations and federal funding priorities are always dynamic, they're always shifting. However, navigating our current environment in which the roles keep changing and there's no real way to predict what those roles will be 6 months from now, it just feels different to me. It's a feeling of uncertainty that many of us have. And I'd say the overseas situation is certainly adding to that uncertainty right now. But nevertheless, the transportation industry continues to do well for those reasons I said earlier. The demand is there, the backlogs are robust, and we in America have a fundamental need for our infrastructure that isn't going anywhere.
Absolutely. Really great recap there, too. This is going to actually bring us to my next question for you. And Tom, I'm going to take this to you because something Jim brought up, too, was about how, states are kind of trying to catch up with everything they need to be tackling. And the focus is on deliverability. Like, we've got to deliver these projects. So, Tom, I want to ask you, because we're seeing a clear shift of responsibility from the federal level to state DOTs. I'd love to hear from you. What's driving that shift, and what are some practical steps that states can take right now to fully leverage tools like the NEPA assignment?
Yeah, I think there are several factors. It's not just one thing happening. And personally, I feel it's a good thing, the trend towards pushing the responsibilities to the state DOTs. One reason is state DOTs have certainly matured a lot since the time that many current laws and regulations were developed and the Federal Aid Highway Program was first established. I'd say many now have very sophisticated project development delivery programs and units, environmental sections that are top-notch, legal teams, stronger asset management practices, and are learning about those complex delivery models, project delivery models that exist. So state DOTs are much more mature, and I think to some extent, Congress and US DOT have recognized that and responded by offering more flexibility and responsibility, especially where the states can demonstrate performance and accountability. That's one factor. Another is just the reduction in staff at the federal government level. I mean, we've all heard about it. Federal Highway Administration reports they've lost about a third of their staff. So the federal government's lost a significant amount of knowledge and, quite frankly, the horsepower needed to deliver such a large and complex program. That's reason number two. And I'd say reason number three is really just the pressure we all feel all the time to deliver projects more efficiently. And in general, when you can remove or reduce the role of one layer of government reviews, approvals, can only help speed things up in delivering projects. You mentioned NEPA assignment. So this is where tools like NEPA assignment come in. NEPA assignment really reflects a broader philosophy shift. Rather than FHWA reviewing every document and decision, states that opt in can assume federal responsibilities, environmental responsibilities for certain project actions. The upside of that is speed, certainty, alignment, where the environmental review becomes more tightly integrated with state project development rather than some parallel federal process. With a new highway bill around the corner, I'd say this is a really good time for Congress and US DOT to be thinking about additional areas where legislation or regulatory revision is needed to further assign responsibilities to the states that are modeled after the NEPA delegation and assignment provisions. I think that NEPA area has sort of plowed the ground and set up a good framework where there are other things that could be delegated to the states through that same type of a process. So you asked what can states be doing right now to prepare for that additional responsibilities? I'd say first they should be looking at their internal capabilities in any areas where they're thinking about trying to take that on. And if they don't have that internal capability, start building it. Second, standardized processes. For example, under NEPA assignment, I'd say the most successful states are those that have developed templates, decision trees, really clear documentation standards so that decisions they make are predictable and defensible. And really, it all comes back to risk. So that level of consistency reduces the risk. And maybe more importantly, builds confidence in FHWA and the resource agencies and everybody else that's watching the NEPA process. I'd say lastly, they can be identifying ways to track their performance. So identify what some good performance measures would be to tell the story. Because I think states that track schedule certainty, litigation outcomes, the length of time it takes to review, get approval, with that hard data, measuring that performance, those are in the strongest position to expand assignment authority and defend it politically. I'd say data builds credibility, and credibility buys flexibility.
Ooh, that's a good soundbite right there. I think we need to almost have that as a cold open. That's really good. That'll be something everybody's going to be repeating in their rooms. We're like, hey, I'm taking this to my next meeting and I'll make sure I spread that word. And it's interesting. You took us to the federal level too, referring to the US DOT and talking about performance just now as well, which Jim, I'm going to bring this next question to you because that also echoes what you've already shared about delivery. You know, the deliverables are really important right now. The focus is there. So during the recent Washington briefing, Secretary Duffy emphasized that results matter more than spending levels alone. So I want to ask you, what does results-driven delivery mean in the transportation world? And then how do agencies ensure projects are delivered smarter and safer and not just faster?
Yeah. Well, I mean, results-driven delivery in transportation, it means shifting the focus from how much did we spend, or how fast did we build it, to did this project actually improve safety, mobility, equity, and long-term performance? It's about measurable outcomes, lives saved, congestion reduced, communities served. It's not just outputs like miles paved or dollars obligated. Projects that have to support a broader goal, such as like economic mobility, movement of freight, for example, from the port, as I like to say, or it's said, from the dock to the door, things like that. It's very important. The bottom line on results-driven delivery, what you're trying to do here is ensure the resources are directed toward the highest impact features and benefits. And to address your second question on how agencies ensure projects are delivered smarter, safer, and not just faster, let me touch on a few areas. I'll start with performance planning. This is using data to make informed decisions and set measurable goals, like reducing fatalities, improving travel time reliability as an example, and then designing those projects around those targets. Another area is, I'll call it safety as a non-negotiable outcome. This involves setting safety performance goals, using data to identify high-risk corridors, and also monitoring safety outcomes after construction to see, how are things, working after that project's constructed. And then the third area, digital tools and data-driven decision-making. We all know that this is increasingly relying on tools and technologies, things like AI-powered traffic modeling, predictive maintenance analytics, 5G-enabled connected vehicle data, all these good things in technology. And, these technologies, they're helping us optimize safety, reduce congestion, and improve asset management. So those are just a few areas to touch on, there. Transportation projects today, they're way more complex than ever. They're integrating technologies, as we talked about. They're addressing climate and disaster recovery issues, where they're hardening assets and building infrastructure to sustain these events. I guess you could just say the traditional build it and walk away approaches are no longer viable. Again, when agencies, focus on results-driven delivery, they're ensuring that every dollar that is spent is producing measurable and meaningful improvements.
Absolutely. I think that's really great that you pointed that out too. Like it's not the way it used to be. You both are really highlighting this well. Times have changed. We're in a new area with this and everybody needs to be cognizant of those changes, but just really trying to advise people too, like here's how to make sure, again, if the focus is on delivery and results, make sure you're hitting those marks and, achieving what you need to achieve. And also, as Tom mentioned earlier, like proving that point to people and being able to educate them about what success looks like. Tom, I'm actually going to take this next question to you. For listeners who may not be familiar, would love to hear how you would describe the purpose of FHWA's Everyday Counts initiative. And more specifically, what makes round 8 of Everyday Counts especially timely or impactful?
It's a great program. It's been around quite a long time. The purpose of Everyday Counts program is to accelerate the deployment of proven yet underutilized innovations that improve how highway projects are planned, delivered, and operated. It's a great program. It's been around a long time. As the 8 indicates, it's the 8th round. And I think it's a every 2-year or maybe every 3-year cycle. So been around quite a while. But technology is moving so fast that we need a program like this that helps us move from just the idea, the concept, into practice. So it has some overarching goals, and in general, it's intended to do things like this: shorten the project delivery process. So where you can allow transportation agencies to move projects from concept to construction more quickly. I talked earlier about how delivering projects more efficiently is a pressure. It's always a pressure in our industry. And so we're always looking for technologies that allow us to do that. Also, I talked about safety. EDC has a focus area around enhancing roadway safety, not just for the drivers, but for the workers, the construction workers. Reducing traffic congestion. I talked about how that is a pressure on the transportation network. So ideas centered around reducing congestion. Anything that saves time, money, and resources, always of interest. And it's also a program that's intended to create this culture of innovation so that state DOTs in particular have, it's ingrained in their culture. They have a way of identifying innovative ideas that are underutilized, they're proven, but underutilized, and then raise them up so that they can move them into practice. Coming back to round 8, you asked, why is it timely and impactful? Well, because it aligns so well with those current pressures that I talked about that are on us in the highway area. So delivery speed, the safety risk. Jim talked quite a bit about the digital transformation that we're going through and the constrained funding that I touched on. So the technologies in Everyday Counts round 8 are focused on those areas. Again, things that are already market ready and in some cases in use by early adopters. I wanted to talk about one thing that's often misunderstood. Everyday Counts is not a funding program, so it's not like you get a pot of money to go do this. It's a leadership and development framework. Again, it's trying to set up this culture of we can identify innovations very quickly and get them mainstreamed. And so while funding doesn't necessarily come with these technologies, the framework is there to help the states implement them. So it also comes with technical support. So FHWA is there to help the states implement those technologies. And there is money. There are programs like State Transportation Innovation Council Incentive Program, or they call it the STIC program, and Accelerated Innovation Deployment Grants. They are very targeted funds and limited, like seed money that can help the states pilot, standardize, and then scale these innovations. So it's less about new dollars, more funds, and more about getting better results from dollars that are already available.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I think that was a whole lot of knowledge too about how meaningful this program is. Like you said, it really touches on so many areas. Sounds like it's really too trying to help all agencies at any level navigate these changes and, be best poised to have successful results. With all these changes going on, there's yet another thing that the industry is having to face, and that is major generational turnover. Yay! But this is where really would love to hear from both of you, because you have such vast experience, you each do, for knowing what skills or mindsets can help be successful in your respective roles in this industry. So take this first to you, Jim. What are those skills and mindsets that are most critical for our next generation of transportation leaders?
Yeah, I mean, I've got 3 areas I'll touch on real quick, but one of them is, they need to be comfortable operating in uncertainty and adapting quickly, right? Yeah. They need to be open to innovations and, areas that are viewed as what we call disruptors or things that are disruptive. We've experienced that recently, certainly in the area of AI and automation. Also, electronic vehicles, charging networks to support the EVs, and connected and autonomous vehicles, right? We talked about that for a while, and that's coming. So, leaders who can learn fast, pivot quickly, and embrace those uncertainties, I think they're going to thrive. Another area I would say is just being fluent at using data, being able to interpret performance dashboards, understand predictive analytics, using, data to justify investments has become very key, right? We need to stretch our money. We need to put the money where it's wise in some of these investments. So, making data-driven decisions is certainly, it's here today, and it's only going to continue to advance. And then the third area, more on the softer side, I guess you could say, is, being collaborative and kind of having a community-centered engagement grounding. So, Tom and I would say, the era of decide what we're going to do, announce what we're going to do, and then defend it, those days are gone. So the new leaders are going to have to be skilled facilitators. They're going to have to be active listeners, and they're going to have to be comfortable co-creating solutions with communities and those that are stewards of the facilities that we're impacting or we're enhancing. So those would be some areas that I would say.
Love it. Those are great, wonderful things to aspire to be successful as a transportation leader. Over to you, Tom. What would you offer for some skills and mindsets that are really critical?
Hard to add to the great answer Jim gave, but I'd maybe expand a little bit. I would call a skill that's going to be needed is systems thinking. We have transportation problems, but they don't live in silos. You're talking about funding, planning, design, construction, operations, resilience. They're all connected. And I think the next generation of leaders is really going to be able to have to see that whole system and understand how decisions in one area can ripple across the rest. The one thing I would also fall back on is traditional skills, leadership skills toolbox, communication, oral and written, top of the list. It's going to be needed. It's needed today in leaders, and it's still going to be needed in our future leaders. Yeah. Leading with empathy, a topic very important to me. I believe some of our best leaders are those that can do that. Coaching, certainly. The ability to explain technical things to non-technical audience. I think that's going to be an even greater challenge in the future with all those things Jim talked about with AI and connected and autonomous vehicles. Very, very technical things that when you're talking to someone who is not technical, you have to figure out how to make your point and do it in plain language. I'd say we've reached a point where that is such an important skill. It's right up there with engineering judgment. So when you add it all up, it's no small task for a future transportation leader. They've got to be a technical expert, a people leader, a strategist, and a storyteller. And so the expectations are really high, and we're going to ask a lot from those future leaders. I think those who will thrive will be the ones who keep learning, stay curious, understand that their job isn't just to deliver projects. It's certainly got a people side to it. You got to build trust. You got to grow people around you, and you've got to steward infrastructure for the long term.
But Tom, it's all relative, right? You think about it, that we didn't have AI when we were coming through, right, as new leaders and young leaders, right? So yes, a lot more expected, but a lot of different tools to help advance some of that. So it's all relative, right?
The calculator was the fancy technology.
That's right. Now we're going to start dating ourselves if we talk about
And I'm not talking about, these small calculators. It was a big thing.
That's right. You needed a backpack to carry your calculator,
exactly.
Right?
Well, speaking of dating ourselves, this brings us to our final question so perfectly. Guess what? RS&H has been around for 85 years. What a journey. So I'm going to take this final question to both of you, Jim first and then to Tom. But looking at that 85-year journey of RS&H, Jim, what would you see as the biggest opportunity for RS&H and the transportation industry over the next 85 years? Oof.
Wow, man, that's a long way to think out to see what's happened in the last 5 years. I can't even imagine what happens in 85 years. But, kind of looking at where we are now and looking forward, I'd say that, it's really important that we remain adaptive, agile, that we embrace industry disruptors, and that we be out front on those disruptors, be innovators, be seen as a firm that provides solutions and is known in the industry as a forward-thinking company. And not only do we want to evolve with the transportation industry, I'd say we want to influence it.
Really good point. Yeah, excellent. And I mean, I'm thinking of like, and Tom, I'm about to take this question to you too, but like the thing that brought to mind was, okay, I'm going to date myself here, Back to the Future, where, he's like, we don't need roads in the future. And it's like, well, yes, but you still have to get around. So figuring out how do we still factor in, that's still transportation, even if things change to where, oh my God, we don't have concrete roads, but where's that happening? So,
but we haven't mentioned this, Rachel, and Tom, I don't know if you were going to hit on this or not, but in that world, advanced air mobility is really on the rise right now. Electronic vertical takeoff and landing, and the ability to almost have, Uber in the air kind of it's coming. And in some places it's here. So anyway, I'll divert over to Tom, but I just had to throw that in when you gave that example. It's here.
It's great. I think our future highways are going to be in the sky, not on the ground.
That's right.
It's just mind-blowing, and to think that it could happen in the next 85-year horizon, right? Mm-hmm. Just awesome. I hope my kids, I'm not sure my kids will be around, but my grandkids, maybe they'll be around to speed up. But it's hard to add anything new. I maybe just reiterate a couple things we've touched on. So I think as a company, our biggest opportunity is going to lie in the degree to which we can embrace those new technologies, the things Jim mentioned, AI, drones. I throw in maybe sensor technologies where we can instrument assets that we have today and learn real time what's going on with them, and predictive capabilities using all that data, give us some advanced warning and timing on when to go out and take certain maintenance actions. It's not that far away. In fact, I think we're doing some of that as an industry, which is really cool to be able to think that, sort of like our cars now, they'll tell us, hey, it's time for an oil change, or you put more air in your tires. We're going to maybe get some technologies to tell us, hey, you need to go wash the crud out of the drain on this highway or this bridge. It's just, I think we're going to get there as an industry. As a company, we just need to figure out how do we want to use those technologies to improve what we offer, the services we offer. And that comes back to understanding what's important to our clients, their programs, their projects, their processes, and how can we help them integrate these technologies into what they do. And I just a word on data, because data can be overwhelming. We have more data than we've ever had before as an industry, and it can just make your head spin to the point where you just say, I don't need all that. Just, let me make a decision. Give me what I need. And so I think that whole area is still ripe for help, and a good place for RS&H maybe to continue to work at and plug in and help take all this data that we can have in the future and make really well-informed decisions in the future.
Well, and to wrap up this too, which you both have offered such great insights, I'll circle back to how both of you described the next generation of transportation leaders. I feel like while you were describing that, you were describing RS&H, frankly, because you're pointing out all the different ways that this agency, for 85 years has been, on the forefront and will continue to be for the next 85 through the next generations. And so with that, I just want to say thank you so much to both of you, Jim and Tom, for being experts here on this episode today and really enlightening us and preparing us for what the transportation industry has in store for all of us. So thank you so much for both of your time today. Appreciate having you both on the pod.
Thank you,
Rita.
Excellent. Well, and just a reminder for everyone, you have been listening to AEC Perspectives, a podcast by RS&H. Please go find and follow us wherever you like to listen to or watch your favorite podcasts. And don't forget to visit us online at rsnh.com. And stay tuned for some future episodes that will undoubtedly tackle the burning topics that are front of mind for you in the areas of architecture, engineering, and construction. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.